Welcome everybody, I'm so glad you're here and I'm excited to talk about Flight Risk. So this is the first movie I've seen in theaters this year and it was a fun way to start things off. So I think last month I was watching War of the Rohirrim and I was watching all the previews and I saw a preview for this movie. And I was like, Mark Wahlberg, huh? This is interesting. It looks like a suspense, thriller type thing. And then I saw that it was directed by Mel Gibson and I was like, done, I'm sold, I'm going. And now listen, everyone may have differing opinions about Mel and I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't care really in the sense that he's one of the greatest actors and directors of all time, in all of cinema history. You may disagree with me, that is fine. I'll be nice to you now and just tell you that you're welcome to try and change my mind, but you're not going to. You probably won't. If you look at his filmography, all of his credentials and everything, he has just an incredible lineup. And I'm a person who believes in forgiveness and second chances, and especially when people ask for forgiveness and they repent and they show changing of their ways. Not trying to get too philosophical here. My point is, regardless of how you think about him as a person, he's amazing at his craft. So I was excited to see it because the last thing he directed was Hacksaw Ridge, which was almost 10 years ago. So I'm yeah, I'm going. So like I said a second ago, it is a suspense thriller movie, but it's also kind of funny. And I think that's intentional. The film stars Michelle Dockery, Mark Wahlberg, and Topher Grace, and there's some other people in there too, but it primarily focuses on them. This is actually the first time I've seen Michelle in anything, which is surprising because I looked up her IMDb and she's done quite a bit of work, but I believe she's from England. I believe she's an English actress. She's done a lot of Downton Abbey type things, and I just haven't really seen any of her stuff, but I thought she was really, really good. You could tell that she's a seasoned actress, and I think she carried herself well in the film. I've always been a fan of Mark and Topher. I think their skills lend to kind of more comedy, but they have range. They've done all kinds of roles, dramatic and so on, and I think they can both pull those things off very well. But I think this film plays to every actor's strength. It's hard for me to say that about Michelle strictly because, again, this is the first movie I've seen her in. So I want to talk about the story a little bit, and I will say, if you've seen the trailer for the film, you're gonna have a pretty good sense of what the movie is and what the story is and the themes and so on. It's not too complicated. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not interesting, and that doesn't mean that there aren't surprises here and there, but it's pretty straightforward. I think what keeps this movie from being kind of one note is the relational dynamics between the characters. Because if you have boring characters, even if it's an interesting concept, if it's simple, it's not gonna be enough to kind of carry you through the film. But I think they did a good job of making each character unique and have the way they play off each other be very interesting of oh yeah, if this person was paired with this person, that would have this kind of a clash or a response or agitation. So that was interesting and again, well acted. So I think that helped quite a bit. And when I'm watching a movie like this, a suspense thriller thing, especially when people are say confined to a specific area, I'm always trying to figure out how a character is going to get out of that tense situation. I always find that just interesting because usually in films like this, there will be visual cues to an item or a name or something, and it's okay, that's going to come back around at some point. I wonder who is going to deal with that and how they're going to deal with that. So it's fun trying to figure out putting the pieces together, putting a puzzle together. So I'm always looking for the clues and thinking about what's gonna happen next. In a similar manner, I also like to put myself in the shoes of those characters and be what would I do if I was able to get a hold of this thing? Or if I was in this tense situation, how would I escape or whatever? I'm always trying to figure out what would I do in this crazy situation? So that's always a fun thing for me. So like I said earlier, the movie is pretty funny. Again, I wouldn't strictly say it's a comedy, but there was more humor maybe than I was expecting. And there were two moments where I laughed out loud. Now, I'll chuckle in a movie, but I feel that's different when you just don't expect to just laugh out loud. And usually I would say that's a good thing, right? I feel people want that effect unless you're laughing at how bad a movie is, which I will say, I don't think I was laughing at how bad these moments were because they were honestly a little cheesy, but I think they were meant to be. And I actually like that. I think honestly that that's part of the reason why I laughed, just because it was like this intentional moment of like levity. So I thought it was funny. So that being said, one of the things, this is I guess maybe a spoiler or a semi-spoiler. I believe I can tell you this without detail and like without spoiling the scene really. But if you're worried, you know, maybe skip the next 10, 15 seconds or something like that. But here we go. There is a scene with a taser, a tasing scene in this movie that is just great. And that's all I'll say. No more details. I just thought it was hilarious. It was great. The other funny moment, I'm gonna leave that up to you to figure out what you think that was. And I think you'll be able to figure out pretty easy. If you think you know what it is, hint at it in the comments. Be careful, don't spoil for people, but like hint that you know what it is. It's a little cheesy here and there. I think it's meant to be, but I don't think that takes away from the fact that it still has a little heart, and I think that's primarily showcased between Michelle and Topher's character. The progression of their relationship in the film, between how they view each other in the beginning to the end, again, it's not necessarily drastic, but it's enough to be like, oh, that's interesting. And you wouldn't have strictly concluded that they would have gotten to that point, you know, at the beginning or maybe even halfway through the movie. I think what I liked about it is that it's not this drastic change, but I think it's enough to give you some relatable connection to these characters, in that like they have a little bit more of compassion for each other. And I found that to be interesting. I don't think it was heavy-handed. Now, some people might think it's a bit of a trope, possibly. I don't know, like they might think it's too simple, but I think it's one of those things, again, where as humans, we would also complain if it wasn't there, if that makes sense. It's like, man, everyone in this is just so like defined and like don't change or grow at all. Like, I think it would be annoying if it was the other way. So if you find it cliche, I don't know what to tell you. I enjoyed the way that they kind of started to see each other differently at the end. Again, try not to give spoilers here. Also, this may seem a little random, but I wanted to mention it because I couldn't get it out of my head when I was watching the movie. I kept thinking about the movie Red Eye, which is another suspense thriller movie that has to do with a plane. If you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. But I will say that even though they are both kind of suspense thriller movies, they're not strictly comparable in terms of story and tone. So different films, but both enjoyable. So I'm gonna give you some of my closing thoughts now of the movie as a whole and whether I recommend it or not. I will say, it was just a fun popcorn flick. You know, it's just a good time. And Mel even said that in these interviews, that it's just pure entertainment is essentially what he was saying. And I agree. I don't even think from the preview that I was expecting some like epic drama from Mel, like, you know, Apocalypto or Braveheart, you know, like I was just like, oh yeah, this is just a suspense thriller movie. It's an action movie. It's just a fun time, which is what it was. It's not super deep strictly, but it's not, like I said, without heart, and definitely has its fair share of humor. So it's got, I feel like, a little bit of everything for everybody. Also, a huge plus is there was no like woke Hollywood messaging in it. I'm so tired of that, and that already elevates this movie above a lot of others, especially over the past several years. I'm sorry, like you can have millions of dollars and amazing cameras and equipment and it can look nice, but if you don't have a good story or good characters and you're not being entertaining, like, I'm sorry, I'm just like, I'm not gonna buy into your film. I'm not gonna wanna watch it again. This is something I think you can just go in for some escapism, some entertainment, some fun, and just enjoy it. So it's not my favorite movie that Mel has ever directed, but it's definitely entertaining, and I think it's a good time. And if you're wanting to go see a movie and you don't like much of the choices, I would say give this one a shot. Like I said, it may not be your cup of tea, but I think there's something in there that you could enjoy. And I do feel like there's gonna be some pretty interesting opinions about this movie that are gonna cover a range of feelings, if that makes sense. But for me, it was a great way to start the year of my movie-going experience. Great first movie in the theaters. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Have you seen it? Do you plan on seeing it? What are your thoughts? Leave them in the comments. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like this review and you want to see more videos about filmmaking and art in general, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.